Hello, friends, and welcome to the last lesson of Unit 3, which is Lesson 7. And this is about Introduction to the Indian Economy. In this, we are going to discuss five things: demographics, growth versus development, urbanization, poverty and inequality, and the policy implications. So, let us start with the demographics. India has a huge size, not only in terms of area but also in terms of the population, and there is a fast growth in all aspects. We are into the second stage of demographic transition, and we'll talk about a lot of migration which is happening. We are rapidly rising density of population. Our sex ratio composition is not very favorable to the females. We have a bottom heavy age structure, as you can see in the diagram. So we have more younger population. That means more working hands, which is a good thing. Predominantly, we are more of rural population. In terms of the quality of life, we have very low quality population, and also we don't have a lot of people who are working, so very low work participation rate as compared to the population. So we have all the symptoms of overpopulation in one way or the other. Now, when we talk about the bottom heavy age structure, I would like to know from you how it is beneficial. Well, there is a term which we call as demographic dividend. That means the developed countries, they are facing a challenge of aged population, wherein the young people are earning and contributing to the GDP, and that money is being used for the welfare of the old population because the aging population is increasing there. Whereas in India, at the moment, the demographics are such that we have more working hands, which is a good thing, and that is why we call it as a bottom heavy age structure, and we have the advantage of demographic dividend. If you look at this chart, for example, Japan, their start of demographic dividend was in 1964, which ended in 2004. So during this period, there is enhanced productivity, which contributes to higher GDP of any country. Similarly, there are other countries like Italy, Republic of Korea, Spain, China, Thailand, Brazil. For India, the demographic dividend started from 2018 and it is going to continue till 2055. So we have 37 years. So we have a bright future that way, and that is from 2018. If you want to look at the dependency ratio, so it is from 49.9 to 49.5. So which is a good thing. So dependency on the young population is not very high. So since 2018, India's working age population has grown larger than the dependent population. And studies show that these are the periods which are marked by rapid economic growth, and that is what we are experiencing. And this is going to continue till 2055. So that way, it's good. Let us discuss about growth versus development. So growth, generally we say, is part of development. If I have to look at economic growth is the measure of value of output of goods and services within a time period. So it is a quantitative measure. Whereas economic development is a measure of welfare of humans in the society. So that is very relative economic development. So if we want to look at the five differences between economic growth and economic development, just to give you the basic idea that generally the developed countries, they look at economic growth because their standard of living, the benchmark is such that almost all people, except for very few, they are having a good quality of life. So they always talk about economic growth. So deals with the problems of developed countries, as I said. So the change is gradual and steady. So it means more output, which they are looking at. And the concerns are quantitative aspects, that is increase in per capita income. That is the sole purpose there. And the scope is very narrow, as economic growth is just looking at the output. When we talk about the economic development for the underdeveloped countries and even for the developing economies, that is where it is not only the GDP growth but also the inclusive growth, so that all people, they come out of poverty and there is a minimum living standard which is maintained. So that can come through the economic development. So it generally deals with the problems of underdeveloped countries, and change is discontinuous and spontaneous, as you see in India. Means not only more output but also its composition, how it is distributed, quantitative as well as qualitative. It has a wider perspective because development means growth plus change. When we say change in terms of the policies, so that there is even distribution of wealth and there is less inequality. What are the indicators of growth and development? The key indicators, if we talk of economic growth, these are five: GDP, whether it is total or per capita GDP, then purchasing power parity, which is in terms of the foreign currency, and generally we have US dollars as the currency for purchasing power. So that is another major. Literacy and health, these are also being part of economic growth because we talked about economic development. So economic growth has no meaning if uh, there is no good health in the country, even if the income is reasonable. So when we talk of economic growth, so that is increase in employment, which will have a fall in unemployment. Increase in the tax revenue so that we can spend more on the public services for the welfare of the state. And as a result, increased consumption, so which encourages more investment, which we saw earlier also in one of the lessons. When we talk of economic performance, which includes the development component, so we should be looking at the real GDP. That means the real wages, the labor productivity, and the investment, which are being considered as part of the GDP and not just the purchasing power parity or GDP per capita. Inflation, unemployment, current account status, and very important factor is the well-being index, which has been added now in economic performance, where we talk about three parameters: life expectancy, happiness levels, and environmental factors. One of the things which is happening all over the globe in a very fast pace is urbanization. So, with the migration, which we say rural urban migration, wherein the rural population is moving to the urban areas because of work, livelihood, so they come to the cities to live and work. So, if we want to look at the impact of urbanization, so the cities are growing in size and their population is enhancing a lot. So, as a result, there is a lot of load on the infrastructure on the cities in terms of electricity, water, infrastructure. As I said, pollution is increasing, transportation requirements are going up, and around 30 people are moving in 1 minute in India from rural to urban area. So that's the extent. And it's good or bad. So the government has come up with a new concept of smart cities, so that they can cater to this migration, try to have the cities having a minimum standard of living for all people. If we look at the migration in India state-wise, so the top five states who are experiencing the out migration, that means people moving out of these states. So number one, Uttar Pradesh, around 11 million. That is 110 lakhs, Bihar 4.19 million, around 40 lakhs, Rajasthan 29 lakhs, Madhya Pradesh 25 lakhs, Maharashtra 19 lakhs. And which are the states who are receiving these migrants who are migrating to these states? Maharashtra, Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Gujarat. These are the top five as per the census 211. Sorry, 2011. When we talk of the impact of urbanization, this is all over the globe. You will be surprised to know that 1 in 4 of the world's urban population live in slums. 1 in 4 persons live in slums in the urban population. So this is one of the biggest 21st century challenge. 90% of the global increase in urbanization is happening in Africa and Asia. Another thing which we need to look at, especially for the Indian economy, is poverty and inequality. So when we talk about poverty, we talk about two different types of poverty. One is absolute poverty, which should not be there, which is very, very bad. What is absolute poverty? Absolute poverty is the measure in terms of the calories that you need to support minimum level of physical health. So if you're not even having those calories, people who are not having those, they are in absolute poverty, which is very, very bad. There are certain countries in Africa who do have this. In India also, during the pandemic, we have seen some people have gone to absolute poverty. Relative poverty is a measure of minimum level of living standards as determined by the government. And this is relative because government in each country has a different living standard as the minimum one. So that's why I call it relative poverty. But it is not affecting the physical health in a way. And poverty is multidimensional. It is not just the money part, it is in terms of access to power, electricity, water, safe water, and non-polluted air. So that also we will consider as part of poverty. If we look at India, and as per the report of 2012, 1 in 5 Indians is poor. So here you are looking at around 270 million Indians who are poor in 2012. So 62% of these are from 7 low-income states. So they populate around 62% of them. Similarly, 45% low-income states, uh, they are home to 45% of India's population. So 80% of India's poor live in rural areas. So if we look at number of poor in the states, low-income states in millions, Uttar Pradesh had that chart, then Bihar, and then you have Madhya Pradesh, and then you have Jharkhand, and then Odisha, and then Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan. At the same time, India, through its various policies to eradicate poverty or de-elevate poverty, has met with good success. In 2005, 640 million people were in poverty, whereas in 2016-17, this figure has come down to 369. So India has been able to lift around 271 million people out of poverty. So policies have worked for India. When we look at the poverty trap, so how poverty affect the economic growth and development, let's have a look. So when we talk of the economic growth, so when there is low income, okay, so there is low saving. As a result of low saving, there is low investment, so there is low economic growth. Similarly, when we talk of development, low income means low level of education and healthcare. So as a result of that, low level of human capital, and then as a result of that, low productivity. So this cycle is continuing, and the poverty trap becomes bigger and bigger. Inequality is another thing which we should be looking at for the Indian economy. When we talk of inequality, it can be the economic inequality, gender inequality, caste inequality, and education inequality. India has not been doing good on all the four fronts of inequality. So, the major is, since we are talking about the Indian economy, let's look at economic inequality. You'll be surprised to know that, as per the data which is shown here, around 1% of the people in India, they have around 51.5% of national wealth. So the richest 10% have around 78% of national wealth, whereas 60% of the poorest in our country have just 4.7% of our national wealth, which is a pity. So this is the graph in terms of the wealth of our country, which is in the hands of few people. If we look at other countries, for example, firstly let us look at India, and this is the data of 2018. So we segregate in three tiers. So the base tier is less than $10,000. The mid range is $10,000 to $100,000, and high wealth is 100,000, more than 100,000. So when we talk of more than 100,000, it is zero point 0.6 in India, very few. Whereas 90.8 is below $10,000. If we look at China, it is a little bit better, although in the middle it is 59.1, which is a good sign. If you look at USA, it is more evenly distributed. So that is what, when we're talking about economic growth, that matters more in USA, whereas in India, economic development matters more because the inequality in terms of distribution of is very, very poor here. Inequality, if we look globally, the world's most unequal countries, Russia, so richest 1%, they have 75% of the wealth. So Russia comes first, India comes second, Thailand, Indonesia, Brazil, China, United States, South Africa, and then Mexico. These are the world's most unequal countries. The last slide is that what are the policy implications? It is very important to understand that you need to work when you're framing your policy, whether these are 5-year plans or any other policy framework that you're going to have for your people in India. So you need to work at gender-based inequality, because only through that the households can benefit. And you need to come out with poverty alleviation programs that we have talked, and India has done well in that, but also the inclusive growth. So if I talk of India, so the structure of GDP growth has been made in such a way that we look at economic development more than economic growth. In terms of employment, because the only way to eradicate poverty and inequality is to bring all the people, whether rural or urban, whether poor or because of inequality, they can't come. So we need to include them into the economic activities of the countries. So employment is the first thing which comes to your mind for policy framework. So in India, employment, orientation of GDP growth, poverty alleviation programs, and employment schemes linked to it. And there are many, we'll be discussing that later on. National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, where they guarantee all the rural people to have some employment for a minimum period of time. In terms of education, your policy framework has to look at that, health, shelter, and in general. Now, this particular video I would like to show you is for sustainable growth. It is very important to include all the people into the economic activity of the country. So let's look at that video. I'm going to start.
In our world, there are over 800 million people living under $1.90 a day. And with 10% of the world's workers and their families living under this international poverty line, it becomes clear that having access to a job is not enough to escape poverty. But if having a job cannot even get you out of poverty, what can? How can we work together to make future generations financially secure? And can we do it sustainably? The 2030 Agenda recognizes poverty as the single greatest global challenge for sustainable development. More importantly, it's the greatest challenge for a future without vulnerability. To eradicate poverty, coordinated efforts must be undertaken to build on the achievements realized so far. But social policy alone cannot end the problem. This is where the 2017 ECOSOC integration segment comes in. Here, experts, member states, and other stakeholders explore cross-cutting policies and work towards an integrated approach to eradicate poverty in all its forms. The goal is to enable communities to enter the formal economy through the job market or as entrepreneurs and bring on expansion of economic and social opportunities. To fight poverty in a sustainable and integrated way, we must identify and discuss economic and social opportunities which at the same time preserve our planet. It is time to take stock of lessons learned and take the next step forward. It all starts at the 2017 ECOSOC integration segment.
The opportunity for the world is when the top and the bottom meet. It's a mutual responsibility to make it work.
So that is where the top and the bottom has to meet. So that is the message that you saw. So the policy implications are huge for countries like India. So that is all from my side. So let me summarize. We talked about demographics, growth versus development, urbanization, poverty and inequality, and the policy implications. Here is a small quiz for you, my friends. Question number 1 is appearing on your screen. Be ready to answer. India has dash heavy age structure, top or bottom? Economic growth or development is a measure of human welfare in the society. What is absolute poverty? I hope you have written your answers. You can check your answers. India has a bottom heavy age structure. Economic development is the measure of human welfare in the society. Absolute poverty is the measure of calories to support minimum level of physical health. So that is all from my side. Thank you very much for being such kind audience. And if you want to go for any further reading, this is the same heritage.org country India. You can look at any country, but if you want to look at India, you get all the stats there and the information. Thank you very much and see you with the next unit very soon. Bye for now. Shabba khair.